May 2nd, 1986, Corsica, France. Sergio Cresto wakes up in a hotel room in Ajaccio and lies still for a moment, looking at the ceiling. He is 30 years old. He is American, born in California, now based in Italy, working a job that puts him in a car seat roughly 170 kilometers per hour, faster than anything most people will ever experience. He is, by any professional measure, very good at it. He has been on this island before. He knows this rally, its corners, its rhythms, the way the road narrows through the chestnut trees above Court and drops away on the left side with nothing underneath. He knows Corsica, the way a person knows a place that has already cost them something. A year ago, almost to the day, his previous driver Attilio Bettega died at this rally. Same island, same stages. Bettega's Lancia went off the road and hit a tree. He was 32 years old. Sergio was part of the same Lancia team. He had read pace notes for Bettega in races before that. He came back anyway. This morning, he has to help Henri Toivonen drive stage 18 of the Tour de Corse. Toivonen is sick, has been since yesterday, running a fever, pale in the team tent between stages. But he is also leading the rally by almost 5 minutes, setting the fastest time on every single stage, defying medical common sense the way he defies every other kind of sense when he gets in the car. The team is not going to pull him. Sergio is not going to ask them to. He picks up his pace notes from the desk. He checks the weather. He gets ready to go to work. He does not know this is the last morning of his life. In 1982, the FIA, the governing body of world motorsport, made a decision that seemed reasonable at the time. They created a new class of competition vehicle for the World Rally Championship. The rules were simple. You had to build at least 200 road cars based on your competition model. After that, there were almost no restrictions on what you could do to the car. No power limit, no weight limit, no meaningful aerodynamic ceiling, no restrictions on the kind of four-wheel drive systems you could engineer. They called it Group B. What followed was 4 years of the most extreme machinery ever built for public road surfaces. Cars conceived not by accountants, but by engineers given a mandate and a budget and told to see what was possible. This was the opening move of a sequence of events that would kill people, end careers, and conclude in a phone call that took roughly 5 minutes to permanently close one of the most spectacular eras in the history of competitive sport. The Group B story starts with Audi. In 1981, the German manufacturer had unveiled a car called the Quattro, a turbocharged coupe with permanent four-wheel drive, built for road use, but conceived with competition in mind. When Group B opened its doors in 1982, Audi walked through them with the Sport Quattro, a shorter, lighter, more violent evolution of the same machine. It produced around 450 horsepower. It had four-wheel drive at a time when rally cars ran on two. On the loose gravel stages of Scandinavia and Portugal, the Quattro rewrote what was considered physically achievable. Then the other manufacturers looked at what Audi was doing, and they decided to go further. By 1985, what the cars filling the Group B grid were not refinements of road vehicles. They were weapons wearing thin plastic body panels. Peugeot's 205 T16 generated 600 horsepower from a 1.8-liter engine. It could reach 60 miles per hour in 2.4 seconds, on gravel, in rain, on a mountain road. The Ford RS 200 was a mid-engined machine with no direct road-going ancestor, built from the ground up to be violent. The Lancia Delta S4, the car Sergio Cresto sat beside every day, ran a turbocharger and a supercharger simultaneously, both feeding the same engine, because one method of forced induction was no longer considered sufficient. The drivers developed a vocabulary to describe these machines. Not fast, alive, not powerful, violent. Anna, more than one of them, would describe the sensation of driving at the limit as less like operating a vehicle and more like holding on to something that had decided it did not want to be held. You know what the remarkable thing is? The stages where they raced these cars were not closed tracks. They were mountain roads, public roads in rural Portugal, France, Corsica, Finland, Italy, narrow, unmarked, as unpredictable as any road used by ordinary traffic for the other 51 weeks of the year. Armco barrier, when it existed at all, was there to manage ordinary traffic speeds. Nothing about these roads was designed for what Group B brought to them, and the spectators knew it. That was exactly why they came. Sergio Cresto had grown up with cars the way certain people grow up with a language. Not something learned, but something absorbed. Early, before you could articulate what you were absorbing. He had moved from California to Italy in his early 20s, chasing a career in motorsport that did not exist for him at home in the form he wanted. He worked his way into the co-driver's seat through the European Rally Championship, reading pace notes for Italian club drivers on weekends, building a reputation through results no one outside the sport would ever hear about. A co-driver is not the passenger. The distinction matters. Sergio sat in the left seat with a clipboard and a set of notes he had helped create during reconnaissance runs made before the event, and his job was to read those notes. Corner descriptions, distance calls, gradient warnings, at precisely the rate required for Henry to process them at speed. And not so slow the driver was running blind, and not so fast the information arrived before it was needed. Get the timing wrong, and you were useless. Get it badly wrong, and you were dangerous. The co-driver's role also demanded something harder to quantify: the ability to suppress every instinct towards self-preservation while the car was in motion. Sergio could see exactly what Henry could see. He could feel every moment the car stepped out of line, every patch where the tarmac changed, every blind crest that appeared sooner than the notes suggested. But he had no steering wheel, no brake, no mechanism for intervention of any kind. His only tool was his voice, and his voice had to remain steady and precise and timed to the 100th of a second, while the car was doing things that would, in any other context, make a person scream. He was very good at that. You do not get to Lancia's factory team without being very good at that. In 1986, Lancia paired him with Henri Toivonen. Toivonen was 29 years old, Finnish, the son of a European rally champion, and widely considered the most naturally gifted driver of his generation. His team boss, Cesare Fiorio, would later say that Toivonen was the only driver who could genuinely control the Delta S4. Every other driver managed it. Toivonen seemed to communicate with it. They won the Monte Carlo Rally in January 1986. Toivonen's father had won the same event exactly 20 years earlier. After the podium, Pauli Toivonen told reporters, "Now the name Toivonen has been cleared." By April, Henri and Sergio were leading the Drivers' Championship standings. The Tour de Corse was the rally where they would extend that lead. 3 months before Corsica, on March 5, 1986, the world got its first clear signal that Group B had built something it could not contain. The Rally de Portugal opened its competitive stages in the Sintra Forest, 20 kilometers outside Lisbon. This section of the rally was infamous. The roads through Sintra were narrow, tree-lined, walled on both sides in places, and routinely packed with Portuguese spectators who expressed their enthusiasm for the sport by standing as close to the action as physically possible. Drivers had been complaining about conditions in Portugal for years. Officials had been told. Nothing had changed. Joaquim Santos, a Portuguese driver competing in a works Ford RS 200, came over a crest on stage 1 and found a spectator stepping into the road ahead of him. He made a correction. The rear of the RS 200 stepped out. In the next several seconds, the car traveled into a crowd that had nowhere to retreat because the crowds behind them were just as dense. 2 children and a woman were killed on the spot. 31 more people were injured. One of the children died in hospital later that day. The race organizers did not stop the stage. 10 more cars went through before anyone with authority intervened. When the factory teams were finally told what had happened, every single one of them, Audi, Ford, Lancia, Peugeot, Austin Rover, signed a joint statement and withdrew from the event. The statement was precise. It did not blame the car or the driver. It said the spectator situation made it impossible to guarantee anyone's safety, and that the drivers were not willing to continue under those conditions. The FIA considered the statement and decided, with some deliberation, to continue the season. Audi did not come back. They withdrew from Group B entirely that same week. But the series went on. The Safari Rally in Kenya passed without incident, and then the calendar turned to Corsica. The Tour de Corse was known in the rally world as the Rally of 10,000 Corners. The island's interior roads were not just narrow, they were relentless. Long stages with no straight sections, hairpin after hairpin through limestone cliffs and chestnut forest, surfaces that alternated between polished asphalt and crumbling edge. What made it extraordinary for spectating was exactly what made it brutal for competing. The roads were too tight for the cars to disappear. You were close to them all the time. Henry arrived on the island visibly unwell. Teammates noticed it in the service park, a stillness about him that was unusual. In a team full of intense, competitive personalities, Toivonen was normally the nervous energy in the room, always moving, always asking questions about the setup, always looking for a tenth of a second somewhere in the data. On Corsica, in May 1986, he was quieter than anyone had seen him. He had been asked about the car in his last recorded interview on the island, about what it was like to push it at these speeds over this distance. His answer was not what you would expect from a man leading a championship. He said that after 4 hours of driving, it was physically exhausting, and that the brain simply could not keep up anymore. He said it was just impossible to race here at this speed. He said it. Then he went out on stage 17 and set the fastest time. By the evening of May 1st, Toivonen and Cresto held a lead of over 5 minutes over the nearest competitor. The second leg began the following morning. Stage 18 started at a town called Corte and ran toward a village named Taverna. 7 kilometers into the stage, at a tight left-hand corner on a road called the D18, with a drop on the outside edge and no guardrail and no spectators for hundreds of meters in any direction, the Lancia Delta S4 left the road. What happened is not known. There were no witnesses close enough to see it. The only footage that existed was shot from the far side of the ravine and was too distant to show anything useful. The car may have suffered a mechanical failure. Toivonen may have had a blackout. He had a history of seizures he had not disclosed to the team, reportedly because disclosure would have ended his career. The road surface may simply have caught the car at the wrong moment in the wrong direction. The Delta S4 plunged into the ravine and landed on its roof. The aluminium fuel tank beneath the driver's seat, unprotected by the skid plate that would normally guard it on gravel stages, removed to save weight on this all-tarmac event, was ruptured by the trees on the way down. The explosion was almost instantaneous. The body of the car was built from Kevlar-reinforced composite plastic. It burned extremely fast. The next crew to come through stage 18 saw the smoke. They turned around and drove back to report it. By the time Lancia team members reached the site, alongside emergency services, the fire was still burning in the trees. The heat was intense enough to keep anyone at a distance. The car was so completely destroyed that it could no longer be identified as a car. What remained was a blackened space frame. Henry Toivonen was 29 years old. He left behind his wife Eria and 2 young children. Sergio Cresto was 30 years old. He was single. He had no children. He had come back to Corsica after losing his last driver here. He had gotten back in the car. He had done the job he was trained to do, reading the notes, calling the corners, trusting the system. He did not survive it. Jean-Marie Balestre, the president of the FISA, was on the island when the news came through. He did not wait for the end of the season. He did not commission a review or convene a working group. Within hours of the accident, he announced that Group B cars were banned from competing in the 1987 season. It was not a measured response. It was the response of someone who had just watched a category kill 2 more people. 3 weeks after it had killed spectators in Portugal, a year after it had killed Attilio Bettega on this same island, and who had run out of arguments for allowing it to continue. Ford had already left. Audi had already left. Lancia, Peugeot, and Austin Rover mothballed their Group B machines at the end of 1986. The homologated Group S cars, Audi, Toyota, Lancia, and Opel had already built prototypes for the next generation of unrestricted machines, were cancelled without ever competing. A power limit of 300 horsepower was introduced for the following season. The FISA later commissioned an investigation into Group B that produced a conclusion no one in the sport had been willing to state plainly while the cars were still racing. It found that drivers' reaction times were insufficient for the speeds the cars could achieve. It found that human eyes could not refocus quickly enough between the fast corners to maintain accurate spatial awareness. Group B had not simply been dangerous in the way all motorsport is dangerous. It had been running at speeds that exceeded what a human central nervous system could reliably process. They had built something that went faster than the people inside it could actually drive. The corner on the D18 above Corte has a low wall now. There is a marble memorial slab set into it, bearing the names of Henri Tuevenin and Sergio Cresto, placed there by the people of Corsica. The road is still used by ordinary traffic. The Group B cars still exist. They are in museums, in private collections, in the warehouses of the manufacturers that built them. The Audi Sport Quattro S1, the Peugeot 205 T16, the Ford RS 200, the Lancia Delta S4, all of them survive. They are maintained, polished, occasionally started and run at demonstration events under controlled conditions, with spectators kept at a safe distance. Stage records set by Group B machinery in 1985 and 1986 still stand on certain roads. 40 years later, modern World Rally Championship cars, built under current safety regulations with all the advantages of 4 decades of engineering refinement, have not beaten them. What they built was real. It is still, in some measurable sense, the fastest thing that has ever been driven on public roads in competition. The question that stays is whether anyone, at any point between 1982 and 1986, looked at what was being built and said, "This is going too far." Whether anyone in the room when the Sport Quattro hit the dyno, or when the T16's output climbed past 500 horsepower, or when the stage routes were drawn through roads where the Armco barrier ended and the cliff began. Whether anyone in any of those rooms said the word "stop," there is no record of it. The cars got faster every year. The crowds got bigger every year. The manufacturers spent more money every year because the investment was producing results and publicity and sales. Sergio Cresto read pace notes for Attilio Bettega at Lancia. He watched what the cars could do from the closest possible distance. He knew what had happened on this island. He knew what was inside the car he got into every weekend. He chose it. He was good at it. He did not get out. The regret is not his. The regret belongs to the system that made what happened on May 2nd, 1986, not just possible, but, given enough time and enough events on enough mountain roads, inevitable. The regret belongs to the FIA, which heard the drivers' warnings after Portugal and chose to continue. To the manufacturers who removed the fuel tank skid plate to save a few grams of weight on a tarmac rally. To the organizers who watched people standing in the road at every event for 4 years and decided the spectators were the problem, not the rulebook. Sergio Cresto was 30 years old. He was a professional. He was doing his job. He had come back to Corsica the year after losing someone there. Because coming back was what you did. Because the alternative was to stop. And stopping was not something the sport made easy, or celebrated, or even acknowledged as a reasonable choice. A marble stone on a corner of the D18 marks where the car left the road. The anniversary of his death is May 2nd. It was also the anniversary of Attilio Bettega's. Same island, same rally, 1 year apart to the day. Neither of them should have been there.